Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to this explainer right here on NFL Nexus. I am absolutely thrilled to have you with us today as we unpack one of the most fascinating, head-scratching, and honestly brilliant roster decisions of the entire 2026 offseason. Before we get right into the thick of it, do me a huge favor. If you love deep dives into football strategy, hit that subscribe button, like this explainer, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Also, if you want to help support the channel so we can keep making these incredibly detailed deep dives, please check out our official NFL Nexus coloring books. They're absolutely perfect for children, for your grandchildren, and yes, even for adults who just want to relax and color some football art. You can easily access them through the link right down in the description or just scan the QR code you see on your screen. All right, let's get right into it. Okay, so let's dive into the massive question hanging over the Pacific Northwest right now. How in the world do you replace a unicorn? To really understand the sheer magnitude of the challenge facing the Seattle Seahawks today, we have to look closely at the landscape of the 2026-2027 NFL season. The Seahawks are the reigning Super Bowl 60 champions. That is an incredible peak to reach, but as literally any football historian will tell you, winning a championship is hard, but defending it, that is a completely different, incredibly vicious beast. First of all, they reside in the notoriously brutal NFC West. It's a bloodbath of a division. Secondly, because of their newly minted championship pedigree, they are staring down a relentless, unforgiving first-place schedule. That means they're going up against the absolute best, most highly tuned offenses the league has to offer, week in and week out. Maintaining an elite defensive scheme under that kind of intense pressure is incredibly difficult. You have to factor in the realities of the salary cap, the inevitable injuries, and the simple fact that 31 other NFL teams have spent their entire offseason doing nothing but studying your film, dissecting your tendencies, and figuring out exactly how to beat you. And that, unfortunately for Seattle, brings us to the harsh, unforgiving reality of NFL free agency. The Seahawks suffered an absolutely undeniable blow when their star cornerback Tariq Woolen departed for the Philadelphia Eagles on the open market. Now, we have to understand that Woolen wasn't just a really good cornerback. He was a structural anomaly, a freak of nature in the best way possible. Standing at 6'4", he was officially listed as the tallest cornerback currently playing in the National Football League. When you lose a player with that kind of specific length, that kind of overwhelming catch radius, and the pure, unadulterated speed to just completely shut down one entire side of the football field, you aren't just losing a player on your roster, you are losing a massive, foundational piece of your defensive identity. You instantly lose the ability to easily match up against those towering, elite, wide receivers in the red zone. So, going into the offseason, the Seahawks were left looking at a defensive backroom with a massive 6'4" hole right in the middle of it. So naturally, the question is, how did the Seahawks front office respond to this crisis? Well, they scoured the landscape for a solution, and they landed on a wildly, almost unbelievably unconventional number, 6'5". I really want you to just pause for a second and think about that specific number in the context of an NFL defensive backfield. Because this specific height is an absolute anomaly. It borders on the absurd. Traditional, highly successful NFL cornerbacks usually sit somewhere in the sweet spot between 5'10" and 6'1". That's because the position inherently requires incredibly fluid hips, a very low center of gravity, and lightning fast change of direction. You have to mirror some of the most agile, twitchy athletes on the planet. When you start talking about a human being who is 6'5", basic physics generally dictates that their hips are going to be stiffer, their pad levels naturally higher, and quick, choppy transitions become a total nightmare. Finding a human being who is 6'5" and can actually play the cornerback position at a professional level, it's literally like finding a needle in a haystack. But against all odds, the answer to the massive Woolen problem turned out to be Tyrone Broden. But here's the absolute twist of the century. Broden isn't some highly touted 5-star defensive prospect they traded up for. No, he is a 25-year-old, 194-pound, undrafted free agent. A guy who spent the entire 2025 season hidden completely out of sight on the Seattle Seahawks practice squad. And more importantly, and this is the craziest part, he has spent his entire football career playing wide receiver. He was brought into this league to catch passes, not to defend them. This is a player who was completely off the radar for the average everyday NFL fan. He was a guy just dipping in and out of those fringe 53-man roster discussions, primarily serving as an offensive scout team piece in practice. To look at an undrafted wideout and somehow see your next elite defensive weapon, that is a true testament to the kind of out-of-the-box, mad scientist thinking going on in Seattle. Just to ground this wild experiment in absolute reality, listen to the official tweet sent out by the Seattle Seahawks on April 30th, 2026. It reads, verbatim, Seahawks Tyrone Broden, who is moving from receiver to cornerback, also changed his jersey number to number 31. Now, we really have to emphasize the psychological and the official organizational significance of this move. When a player, legally and officially, changes their jersey number to reflect a totally new position group, it signals a permanent, locked-in organizational commitment. Wearing number 31 places him firmly, unequivocally in the defensive back identity. He is no longer just an offensive weapon who is moonlighting on defense for a few trick plays. He is, fundamentally and officially, a cornerback in the National Football League. Let's really compare these two frames for a minute because it's wild. Tariq Woolen, who obviously left for the Eagles, stood at a massive 6'4" and very proudly held that title of the tallest cornerback in the NFL. The Seahawks were faced with the seemingly impossible task of replacing the tallest corner in the entire league. So what exactly do? They literally find the one single guy in their own building who is actually a full inch taller. Tyrone Broden steps onto the field at an incredibly imposing 6'5". The sheer irony here is amazing. The Seahawks didn't just replace the pure vertical height of the position, they actually upgraded it, and they did it by digging into their own offensive practice squad. It's mind-boggling. When Broden lines up on the boundary, he is going to physically tower over virtually every single wide receiver he faces, creating a physical mismatch that is just incredibly rare to see on the defensive side of the ball. Part 1. The 6'5" experiment, from catching passes to defending them. Let's meticulously map out exactly how he got here, looking at this 57-game college career timeline. Broden actually started out in the MAC, experiencing his absolute peak statistical years at Bowling Green across the 2021 and 2022 seasons. Hoping to prove himself on a much bigger national stage, he made the incredibly tough transfer to the SEC, joining the Arkansas Razorbacks for the 2023 and 2024 seasons. Unfortunately, as we'll see, that transition didn't exactly elevate his draft stock the way he hoped, which ultimately led him to go completely undrafted in the 2025 NFL Draft. But you have to respect his sheer determination. His grit kept him going, earning him an undrafted free agent deal with the Seahawks, where he just put his head down and grounded it out on the practice squad. And now, here in 2026, we see the ultimate career pivot, the official switch to cornerback. Now, taking an intense look at the stark contrast in his collegiate production tells the exact story of why he went undrafted. Over his 57-game college career, he put together a highly respectable 1,505 total receiving yards and 16 total touchdowns. But you really have to look at the breakdown to understand his journey. During his peak years at Bowling Green, he was an absolute force to be reckoned with. 68 receptions, 1,102 yards, and 12 touchdowns. He was dominating. But when he made that massive jump in competition level to the SEC with Arkansas, his production dropped off significantly. He managed just 30 receptions, 306 yards, and 4 touchdowns over 2 full years. That undeniable steep drop-off against NFL-caliber defensive backs in the SEC is exactly what terrified professional scouts and caused his name to be completely ignored during all 7 rounds of the 2025 draft. And when you dig deep into the scouting reports from that time, it reveals a very specific, undeniable, fatal flaw in his game. Broden struggled significantly to consistently hold on to the football. Despite having a massive, sprawling catch radius and successfully securing 16 college touchdowns, his drop rate was highly, highly concerning. For an NFL offensive coordinator, dropped passes are the ultimate drive killers. They make a player a complete and total liability on the field. You simply cannot trust a receiver on a crucial third down if you aren't absolutely sure he's going to secure the catch. So he was deemed far too big of a risk to put on the field as a pass catcher. But right here is the absolute genius of the Seahawks front office evaluation. Think about it. A dropped pass on offense is a disaster, right? But a dropped pass by a defensive back? Well, that's just a highly successful pass breakup. The very flaw that completely ruined his offensive career makes him a fascinating hidden gem for a defensive coordinator looking for length. Part 2. Why play cornerback? The answer to why he's playing cornerback lies in this absolute freak of nature number, 437. To have a human being who is 6'5" and weighs 194 pounds explode off the line of scrimmage and run a blistering 4.37-second 40-yard dash is honestly bordering on superhero territory. You just do not see guys with that kind of massive limb length generate that kind of explosive breakaway speed. Usually taller players take a really long time to build up to their top gear. They are striders. But Broden has genuine, explosive speed right out of the gate. This 4.37 time means that if an opposing wide receiver tries to run straight past him, Broden has the pure, raw athletic capability to smoothly turn his hips and run stride for stride with almost anybody in the National Football League. So let's break down the exact X's and O's of how this works. We're talking about deep vertical coverage. This involves defending against those deep downfield pass routes, the aggressive go routes, the deep posts that take the top off a defense. It inherently requires the cornerback to match the receiver's speed, stride for stride, get right into their hip pocket, and then use pure physical length to disrupt the catch point. Think about the geometry of the field here. If you have a 6'5" corner running a 4.37, you have theoretically created an absolute nightmare for any opposing wideout. Broden doesn't necessarily need to have the quickest, most agile hips on underneath, twitchy routes if he can just use his massive wingspan and elite reaction time to completely erase the deep third of the field. Even if a world-class receiver somehow gets a half step on him, Broden's massive catch radius allows him to literally swat away passes that smaller, traditional cornerbacks could never even dream of reaching. But making this kind of massive transition isn't just about the physical tools, right? There is a huge psychological component to roster management that we have to discuss. It's incredibly daunting to walk into a completely new meeting room and have to learn an entirely new language of the game. That's exactly why it is so crucial to note that Broden is actually being reunited with his former Arkansas teammate, Julian Neal. Neal is a highly touted prospect who transferred into Arkansas from Fresno State for his final season, and he was actually just drafted by the Seahawks in the 3rd round, 99th overall. Having a familiar face like Neal sitting right next to him in the defensive back room is absolutely invaluable. It provides Broden with a critical sense of comfort, a reliable, trusted study partner, and someone who inherently understands his background as he navigates this insanely difficult professional pivot. Part 3. The Blueprint for Success. Now, I know some of you might be skeptical, thinking this is just a desperate gimmick, but the Seahawks actually have a proven blueprint for this. Let's diligently outline the career arc of Bo Melton. He was drafted by Seattle as a wide receiver back in 2022. Fast forward to last season, and Melton made the exact same transition we are talking about today, switching from wide receiver to cornerback. And what was the result? He successfully played in 16 games for the Green Bay Packers in that brand new role. The Seahawks front office has hard, undeniable evidence, a literal recent case study that they themselves initiated, proving that taking an elite offensive athlete who maybe just doesn't quite have the hands for the NFL and teaching him how to disrupt passes instead of catching them is a highly viable pathway. They know for a fact this transition is possible because they have seen it happen right before their eyes in the modern NFL. And honestly, we absolutely cannot talk about this experiment without extensively praising the mad scientist himself, head coach Mike Macdonald. Macdonald's defensive system is famously complex, aggressive, and wildly unpredictable. Just look back at what his defense did to the AFC-winning New England Patriots. His intricate system completely and utterly discombobulated them. But here is the catch. To run a scheme that intricate and demanding, Macdonald relies heavily on finding unique athletic profiles who simply don't fit traditional positional molds. He needs incredibly unique chess pieces. He needs players with highly specific, rare traits, like a 6'5" frame combined with 4.37 speed, so he can deploy them in highly specific sub-packages that opposing offensive coordinators simply cannot prepare for because they've never seen it before. So let's play devil's advocate for a second. What is the absolute worst-case scenario here? Let's say Broden never actually makes the final 53-man game day roster. Even in that scenario, the Seahawks completely win this gamble. Why? Because keeping a 6'5" cornerback on your practice squad is an incredibly invaluable, unique tool for testing your own offense. Think about it. During the week of practice, you can have Broden line up directly across from your starting wide receivers. It forces your offense to test their fronts and their releases against massive defensive backs. If your starting receivers can figure out how to successfully get off the line of scrimmage against a 6'5", 194-pound corner with 4.37 speed in practice on a Wednesday, they are going to be absolutely 100% prepared for anything a normal-sized corner throws at them on Sunday. Broden literally makes the entire team better just by being in the building and pushing the offense. Which brings us to our final, deeply thought-provoking question of the day. Will this 6'5" gamble be the cleverly calculated piece that actually helps secure a Seattle dynasty, or is it just a massive experiment that will eventually fade into the background? The reality is, the Seahawks already have a deeply loaded, incredibly talented defensive backs group. The actual odds of Broden coming in and becoming a top starter immediately are frankly incredibly low. But that's not really the point. The fact that the home of the reigning Super Bowl champions is actively willing to be the ultimate test site for NFL reinvention tells you everything you need to know about why they are at the very top of the mountain right now. They are turning over every single rock, heavily utilizing every ounce of athletic potential in their building to maintain that elite edge in the bloodbath that is the NFC West. And that wraps up our deep dive into the Seahawks' fascinating defensive experiment. If you enjoyed this incredibly detailed breakdown, please make sure you hit that subscribe button for NFL Nexus, give the explainer a like, and leave a comment below. Let me know if you think Tyrone Broden will actually make a real impact on Sundays. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And before you go, remember that the best way to support the channel so we can keep bringing you these deep dives is to buy our coloring books. They are amazing for children, grandchildren, and adults too. Grab them via the link in the description or the QR code right there on your screen. Thank you so much for learning with us today, and we will see you in the next explainer.